Hey guys, I'm Colin from Brilliant Labs, and I'm going to be doing a Scratch tutorial. This one's going to be aimed more for an advanced crowd, so I'm going to kind of be assuming that you know a little bit about Scratch already, and you're trying to take your programming skills to the next level. So I'm going to show you the actual game that we're making right from the get-go. So we start out, and we've got this bat, counts down, and then we're going to be trying to grab these butterflies. All of the sprites and animations you can find in Scratch, so you won't need to go anywhere else. You should be able to get all of this done just by following this tutorial. So the first thing we're going to want to do is we're going to actually want to create our bat. So we don't want the cat sprite, so we're just going to throw that in the trash. We're going to go down to choose sprite, choose a sprite, and then we have to go find it. So I picked the bat. I'm not sure what it's called. Oh, it's called bat, but you can really pick whatever you want. Then you'll notice if we go into costumes, it has multiple different costumes. So we're going to be switching between these in order to actually make it look like it's animated. So that's actually the first step that we're going to do. So we're going to find this when green flag clicked. We're going to go down to forever. And we're going to be creating multiple of these that are running at the exact same time. For now, I'll just show you this one. So we're going to switch costume to bat A. And then we're going to wait 0.1 seconds. And then we can copy this, switch to bat B, and then there we go, we have our bat. We're going to bring its size down to 40 because it's a little bit big. Cool. So the next thing that we're going to want to do is make it actually follow us. We're going to use our mouse pointer, so it's going to constantly be following our mouse. Now we need to create another one of these. And the reason why is because this wait 0.1 seconds will pause everything in here. So we want to create one that doesn't have any waits in it and contains the rest of the code. So luckily this is pretty easy. We're going to find go to and then change this from random position to mouse pointer. So now with a few lines of code, we already have our bat up and animating. The next thing we're going to want to do is add our backdrop. So if you go down here to choose a backdrop, you can pick any one of these. I personally went with the woods one, but it doesn't really matter which one you pick. I just thought it matched the theme with the bat. So the next thing we're going to do is create our dinosaur. So we're going to go back to choose a sprite. And we're going to go down until we find Dinosaur 3. The specific costume that we're going to use is the B and C. So we're going to be rotating between these two the same way that we did with our bat. However, we're going to be making clones of these because there's going to be multiple of them coming down. So instead of clicking when flag clicked, we're going to go to control. And then we're going to get when I start as a clone. We're going to bring the size down to 50 so it's a little bit smaller. Then we're actually going to include this when flag clicked. Because the thing is, when you have clones of a sprite, the sprite is still going to be there when you first go in. We don't want this sprite to be there, we only want its clones to be there. That will make more sense in the future, but for now, basically what you're going to want to do is go into look, and hide it. So now when the game starts, the original dinosaur will be hidden. And then when it spawns in as clones, we're going to make it do other stuff. The first thing we're going to do when it spawns as a clone is we're going to want to show it. Then we're going to grab a forever loop. And this is how we're going to trigger our costumes. So we're going to switch costume to Dinosaur B. And then we're going to wait 0.2 seconds. Right click, duplicate. Switch to costume C. And as you can see, it's working right there. So we're not actually going to hide it yet because we want to be able to test it. So we want it to be visible for now. But just remember that the way clones work, you're going to have to hide this later. So then we're going to have another when I start as a clone. Because remember, if we start running things in this one, they will also have to experience that wait 0.2 seconds. Programmatically, this is called asynchronous. So we're going to be running two things at the exact same time. So as soon as the clone spawns in, the first thing we're going to want to do is make sure it's at the very top of the screen. So if we go to our Y value and set it to something really high, like 300, it will max out to its top value and tell us what that is. So the top value here is 203. So we're going to go to motion, and we're going to go set Y to 203. Then we're going to want to set its X position to be random, because you don't want it to spawn from the exact same X position every time. So if we scroll over to here, or drag our dinosaur over to here, it looks like probably about negative 180 is the farthest we want it to be, which means positive 180 will bring it to the other side. So now that we have those two values, we can go set X to, and then if we go down to operators, we'll find this pick random number, and we can set it between negative 180 and positive 180. So now as soon as it spawns in, it's going to be set to the very maximum Y, and then it will be between here to here. The next thing that we're going to want to do is make our dinosaur move. So we're going to go to control, and we're going to drag another forever block in. And then we're going to find this change Y by, and we can maybe make it -3. And then it will slowly move down. It's not going to right now because it's not a clone. But we're actually going to make it a little bit cooler than this. We don't want every single one of them to have the exact same speed, because that's going to make it predictable. So instead, we're going to go to variables, and we're going to go to make a variable. And we're going to call this dinosaur speed. And we're going to click for this sprite only. So now we have this variable, dinosaur speed. You can see it up here. And what we're going to do is, as soon as it starts as a clone, we're going to set dinosaur speed. We're going to drag this over here. We're going to set dinosaur speed to a random number between -3 and -10. So then instead of changing Y by -3, we're going to change Y by dinosaur speed. So now every single dinosaur will have a unique random speed. Then we need to find out what the bottom Y is. So if the top one is 203, then that means we can assume the farthest down that we're going to want it to be is 203. Actually, the farthest down that'll let us go here is -194. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back to control. We're going to drag an if statement in here. And then we want to find this less than under operators. And we're going to do if Y position is less than -193, then we want to delete this clone. So we no longer want the dinosaur to be there once it reaches the bottom of the screen. So now we're going to go back to our bat, and we're going to set up our dinosaur spawner. And the reason why we're using our bat is because our bat is always going to be on the screen. There are no clones of the bat. So we're going to have the bat sprite script doing everything that we need for the entire game. So because it's a spawner, there's going to be waiting a specific amount of time. So we're going to need to create another loop. So if we scroll down, we should find create clone of, and we're going to change it from myself to be Dinosaur. Then we're going to go back up to wait 1 second, but we don't want one to spawn every second. We want them to spawn randomly. I think a good amount of time would be from 1 to 2 seconds. So now if we click play, you can see the dinosaurs are spawning at random X positions at random speeds. Awesome. Now you're going to notice this dinosaur speed thing right here. We want to get rid of that. So all you have to do is, when the game is first clicked, remember to hide. And then we're going to go back to our variables and click hide variable dinosaur speed. So then when you hit it again, it'll disappear. Okay, so we're going to do a quick recap. So in our bat, we have this one loop here that continuously is swapping our bat's costume every 0.1 seconds, giving it the illusion that it's moving. Then we have another loop that's constantly making the bat go to our mouse cursor. Then we have a third loop that creates a clone of Dinosaur 3, which is the name of our sprite, every 1 to 2 seconds. So it picks a random time. So this could also be 1.1, 1.2, etc. And then it creates a clone of that dinosaur. So then when the dinosaur's clone gets created, it's also running code that swaps its costume, except for this time it's every 0.2 seconds, but that's just because I thought it looked better. You can adjust the values however you'd like. Then we also set its Y to 203 because it's the very top. Then we set its X to a random position between negative 180 to 180 so that it goes between left to the right. And then we give it a random speed by creating a variable, and we set that random speed to negative 3 to negative 10. And we make it negative because if it was positive, it would move up. So we want it to move negative on the y-axis. And then our forever loop, we change y by dinosaur speed, which would be somewhere between negative 3 to negative 10. Then if our y position gets to the bottom of the screen, we delete the dinosaur. So the next thing we're going to want to do is create our butterfly. So we're going to go to choose a sprite. And then we're going to find our butterfly too. I'm going to change its size down to 50 so that it's a little bit smaller. And we're going to be essentially doing the exact same thing almost to this butterfly as we did to the dinosaur. So this will be kind of a even better recap than what I just did. So we're going to create another variable for this sprite only called butterfly speed. And when the game first loads, we're going to hide that variable so it's not visible up here, just because it looks a little bit annoying. Then we're going to go to looks, we're going to scroll down and we're going to find hide, and we're going to hide the original variant because we only want the clones to be displayed. So then we're going to go when I start as a clone. We're going to show it, and then we need to find the lowest X that it can be. So we're going to set it to negative 300, knowing that it won't go that far. It's just going to tell us what our max is. So negative 260. So we're going to go to motion and set X to negative 260. And because our butterfly is already there, it automatically fills in the value for us. So then we're going to go to set Y, except for this time, we want it to be at a random position between top to bottom. So if we scroll up to the top, we can see our Y can probably go to about 150. Cool. So then negative 150, that seems like a good number to me. So I'm going to set Y to be a random number from negative 150 to 150. Then we're going to create we're going to set our butterfly speed variable to a random number between 3 and 10. And again, this is just me messing around with the values to see kind of what works best, but you can change it to whatever you feel works for your game. So that now that we have everything set up, we're going to want to create our loop. And we are going to change our X by butterfly speed. And then we need to delete it when it gets to the end, similar to the dinosaur. So we're going to type in our max X. Let's type in 300, 3000, 256. So we are going to go here and drag this equals operator in. We'll go back to motion and find our X position. So if X position equals 256, then we're going to delete this clone. So now our butterfly is all set up. But remember, if we hit play, it's not actually going to do anything because it's a clone. So we have to create the thing that spawns the clones in there. So we're going to do that the same way that we did the dinosaurs. In fact, we can actually just right click this when flag clicked, click duplicate, and then instead of creating clone of dinosaur, we can just change it to butterfly. So you can change these values to make one of them spawn more frequently than the other. I'm just going to leave it as is for now and click play. So as you can see, the butterflies are spawning between the top position to the bottom position. The dinosaurs are spawning from right to left. So now the next thing that we need to do is make sure that our bat can interact with the butterflies. So we're going to go to variables, make a variable, and we're going to call this one score. And for this one, it's really important, click for all sprites. So all sprites should have access to this variable. And then on our butterfly, right down here, we can do if, then go to sensing, touching, change it from mouse pointer to bat. We're going to change score by 1. So this will add 1 to our score. And then we also want to delete this clone if the bat touches it as well. So we're going to keep the score visible there so that everybody can see it. Oh, whoops. We set delete this clone outside of the if statement. Cool. All right, so they are incrementing our score. The next thing we're going to want to do is make it so that the bat gets hurt when it touches the dinosaur. So we're going to go to variables, make a variable. And we're going to call this one lives, and it's fine if it's visible to all sprites. So we're going to go to variables, and we're going to set lives to 3. And you want to make sure that you don't set lives inside the forever loop, because it will continuously set your lives to 3 the entire time you have the game open. We only want it to do it when the game first starts. So then I'm going to drag these down here so that we have a bit more room. And we're going to put an if statement right under here. We're going to grab this touching mouse pointer and drag it into the if statement. And we're going to say dinosaur. If we are touching the dinosaur, then we want to change lives by -1. So now, if we go back into it, it'll set our lives to 3. And if we're touching this dinosaur, we're losing lives. But as you can see, it's continuously making us lose lives. Ideally, what we're going to do is set it up so that you gain a few invincibility frames so that you only lose 1 life every like 3 seconds. And obviously we never want to get our lives past 0 into like the negative values, so we're going to fix that as well. So we're going to create another one of these loops that is similar to the costume switches, but instead we're going to make it hide the sprite and then show the sprite really quickly so it looks like invincibility frames. But in order to do this, we're going to want to create another variable called isInvincible. When we get hit, we're going to want to set isInvincible equal to true. Or 1. 1 means true in this case. So then we only want to get damaged if we aren't invincible. So we're going to drag an if statement into here. Put in the equals operator. And then if is invincible equals 0 or false, then we'll get hit. So now if we reload the game, we'll get hit and lose a life. We're set to invincible, so we can't get hurt anymore. So now that we're invincible, we need to make a way to lose the invincibility. So we're going to create another loop using this when flag clicked. We're going to grab another forever. And we only want to run this if we are invincible. So we're going to say if invincible equals 1. Or if is invincible equals 1. Then we're going to go to wait. And we want it to flicker really quickly because remember, it's making the player completely invisible for a short amount of time to give the illusion that they're invincible. So we don't want them to be invisible very long because they won't be able to see themselves. So we're going to only wait 0.05 seconds. And then we're going to hide. And then we'll copy this. And instead of hiding the next time, we're going to show. And then we're going to set invincible back to 0. Now we're going to run into a slight problem. So as soon as we are invincible, this forever is going to go off. It's going to wait 0.05 seconds, hide us, wait another 0.05 seconds to show us, and then set invincible to 0. But the problem is that means our invincibility frames are only going to last for 0.1 seconds. So we want to repeat this probably about 15 times. So if we go to control, we can find this repeat. And we're going to change this to 15. I'm going to drag this in here. And let's try that out. Okay, and as you can see, you can't get hit while you're already... Oh wait, yes you can. So we have a slight bug. It is causing the invincibility frames to happen, but we're getting hit while we're touching the dinosaur multiple times. So that'll be a pretty simple solution. We want to drag this set is invincible actually below this one. So we only want to set is invincible back to 0 once the entire loop runs out. So if we click play now, our bat is not showing up. Okay, so if the last thing that triggered was hide and we didn't trigger show, that will actually stop our bat from showing. So we want to make sure that as soon as we load the game up, we immediately show them. So let's see if that was the problem. Cool, so our bat is visible again. We are not getting hurt anymore. Cool. So the problem we're going to run into is we're still going to go into the negative lives. So a little bit of a quick recap. When we touch the dinosaur and we're not invincible, we lose a life and set our is invincible variable to 1. So then it'll go back to do this again when we're touching the dinosaur, but it won't actually run this code because our is invincible variable is set to 1 instead of 0. Then down here we have another loop that runs only when invincible is set to 1. It repeats this 15 times, which flickers the bat and causes it to let us know that we have invincibility frames. And then once it happens 15 times, it sets is invincible back to 0 and the game just continues to run. So the next thing we're going to do is make sure that our lives can't go past 0. We're going to drag this if else right in here. But then we want the is invincible to be in the else. So we'll drag it all back in like this. So now we're going to do if lives equals 0. And we want our changed lives to be above. So when we touch the dinosaur, it makes us lose a life. And then it's going to say if lives equals 0, then we're going to do something else. Otherwise, set invincible to 1. So now we're going to create a variable that actually runs the entire game. So we're going to call this in-game. And we're going to set in-game to 0 when you lose. And then when we load the game, we'll actually need to set in-game to 1. And then we're going to make it so that nothing else runs unless in-game is set to 1. So we're going to go to if equals, then if in-game equals 1. Then we're going to grab all of our stuff and all of our forever loops. Okay, so now the bat will only animate if we're in-game. The invincibility one won't actually matter because we're never going to be invincible if we're not playing the game. But we do want to stop enemies from spawning and the butterflies from spawning when we're in-game. So the easiest way we can do this is just to right-click what we already made and then duplicate it. Then we can scrap that, copy it, put that in there. Okay, so that might seem a little bit confusing, but basically what we're doing is when we first load up the game, we have a variable now called in-game, and we're setting it to true, which lets everything else know that it's allowed to run. But when we die, or when we run out of lives, we're setting in-game to false, to let the game know to stop doing everything because we're no longer playing the game anymore. Now we're also going to make sure that everything else despawns when we're not in game. So if we go back to our dinosaur and we go back to our forever, we're going to go if, grab our equals operator, in game equals 0. Then we're going to delete this clone. And then we'll go back to our butterfly and we'll do the exact same thing. If equal operator in game equals 0. Then we'll delete the clone. Let's click play and see how it runs. Okay, so now we have lost all of our lives, everything is despawned, and we're no longer animating. And that's good, because now we're going to create a death animation. So we're going to go back to our bat, and not only are we going to set in-game to 0, but we're also going to create another variable called in-death animation. And we're going to set in-death animation to 1. Keep in mind we want to make sure that that is set to 0 from the very beginning of the game so that we're not in our death animation. During our death animation, we're not going to have to use any wait times, so we're not going to have to create another loop. We can just use the one that we already had. This one's specifically designed to not have any wait times inside of it. So we want it to be under the is invincible because it's not related to any of this code. So we're going to put in another one right down here. And we're going to do if death animation equals 1. So if we're in our death animation, we're going to swap our costume to costume C. And then we're going to change Y by -2 to make us fall. So then we want to find our bat. We want to find the lowest point that it can be. So that looks to be about -180. So we're going to go and make another if statement. Oh, let's drag this out of the way. So we're going to do an equals operator. And we're going to do if Y position equals 180. Then we're going to set our lives back to 3. And then we're going to set in-game back to true. And we also want to reset our score. I don't believe we set our score up top. No, we didn't. So we want to make sure from the very top that we reset our score every single game. Now there's a lot of these variables up here. Let's just hide them so that they're not in the way. So we're going to hide in death animation. We're going to hide is invincible. And we're going to hide in game. But we're going to leave our score and our lives. So our score is working. We're losing our lives. Oh, and it's still going to our mouse cursor. So we want to make sure that it only goes to our mouse cursor if we're in the game. So we're going to have another if statement. And we're going to do if in-game equals 1. But then we want to still be able to do our death animation. Oh, it looks like our butterfly clone got cut off there. Let's drag this up. It's hard to keep this organized, unfortunately, in Scratch. But we'll do what we can. So now this is death animation. We want that to be on the outside. Okay, let's try and run that again. We'll lose our lives. It'll make us fall all the way to the bottom. Oh, and it's saying the bottom is 191 instead of the 180. So I'm going to have to change this value to negative 191 and then retry it. Then we'll wait for it to fall all the way to the bottom. Okay, and then it resets our game. Now instead what we're going to do is when we reset our game, we're going to have a little bit of an animation so that it counts down from 3, 2, 1. So since we're going to have to call that when we die and also from the beginning of the game, we're going to create a block and we're going to call this setup. And we're going to click OK. And then we're going to get rid of our forever from this. And we're going to put all of our setup stuff under this setup block. And then we're going to take setup from over here and put it over here and drag the forever back on. So then we're going to go down here and we can actually get rid of this setup stuff and drag our setup back in. So now when we die, it will call the exact same code as here. So now we can just edit our setup code once. So before we set our in-game to 1, that's when we're going to do our animations. So we're going to switch our costume to Bat D because he's wrapped up in his little cocoon and I think it just looks cool. So then we want to go to the very middle of the screen. So we're going to go to 0 on the x-axis and 0 on the y-axis. And then we're going to say 3 for 1 second. And then we're going to say 2 for 1 second. And then we're going to say 1 for 1 second. And then we're going to set in-game to true. So now you'll see when we click the green flag, it will show our bat and call this setup code before it actually goes into our loop. Okay, so the issue we're running into right now is by default in-game is set to 1. So even though it won't let us move, it's still spawning everything else. So right from the very beginning, before we do anything, we want to make sure that we set in game to be off. And actually, it would probably be best if we set that as the first piece of code that ran. So right here. Okay. So now the game seems to be working as it should be. So there's plenty of stuff that you can do after this to expand upon it, such as a high score. So right now our score is 8. If we lose all of our lives, it just resets it back to 0. So that's something that would be cool to try and implement. Another thing would be maybe change the speed of them depending on what your score is. So let's say you get a score of like 100, it could make your maximum speed go up so they can move quicker, or it could make more dinosaurs spawn and less butterflies spawn. You can make it so that like if your score reaches 100, you change the background. So there's a whole bunch of things that you can do to experiment and make this game better. You could even add your own power-ups. So you can have power-ups spawn the same way that we have the dinosaur spawn, but maybe when you touch it, it gives you invincibility time. It gives you invincibility frames. So this is the perfect thing that you can take and then start expanding upon it. The game doesn't have to be done just because the tutorial's done. So keep learning. I'm going to keep creating some of these tutorials, and then I'll see you in the next one.